This is the incident or the statement of Hazrat Uthman. رغبة عثمان بن عفان رضي الله عنه في تلاوة القرآن. Hazrat Uthman رضي الله عنه's desire and love and his passion to make tilawah of the Qur'an al-Kareem. Allah give us glimpses of that. Allah give us love for the Qur'an al-Kareem. أخرج الإمام أحمد في الزهد وابن عساكر أن عثمان رضي الله عنه قال, Hazrat Uthman رضي الله عنه said, ما أحب أن يأتي علي يوم ولا ليلة. I don't like it that a day or a night goes by in my life إلا أنظر في كتاب الله, except that I must look into the Qur'an al-Kareem and read. Even though he was a hafiz of the Qur'an al-Kareem, he loved looking into the Qur'an al-Kareem and reading and reading and reading. يعني القراءة في المصحف. Another report states, quotes a statement of Hazrat Uthman رضي الله عنه قال, لو طهرت قلوبنا ما شبعتم من كلام الله. He addresses the ummah and his students. And he says, if our hearts were pure, you would never, he's addressing us, you would never get tired of reading the Qur'an al-Kareem. You would never get satiated. You would never get quenched. You would want more and more and more. So he actually analyzed our condition. Because sometimes we ask ourselves that we're reading the Qur'an al-Kareem, but why is it that we get so tired? Why is it that we get so lazy? Why is it that we don't enjoy it as we should be enjoying it? Hazrat Uthman gave the answer here. He said, لو أن قلوبنا طهرت, and that's the next statement. لو أن قلوبنا طهرت ما شبعنا من كلام الله. If our hearts were clean and pure, we would never ever get tired of Allah's kalam. The fact that we get tired, that's a sign of our sickness, that our hearts are impure. Now, how to analyze this and understand this, as our pious people give the example. They say that a man who's sick, severe fever, flu, you give him and show him the best itar, 1,000 riyal you bought it for also. Tell him, smell this. See how pleasurable, enjoyable, what an amazing scent and fragrance. He said, I can't find anything. I can't smell anything. Where's the problem? Is the problem in him, or is it in that expensive itar you have? It's the sick man. A man who's very, very ill, and you present the tastiest, most scrumptious meal before him, but he just can't eat. It can't go down. Is the problem in the food or the person? And in the same way here, when we are not paying attention to Qur'an al-Kareem, this is a clear sign that you and I are suffering spiritual maladies. That's why as we cleanse ourselves, we will love Allah Ta'ala's kalam. And there were so many people like this. We learn in history, as the friend of Allah Ta'ala says so beautifully, جَمِيعُ الْكُتْبِ يُدْرِكُ مَنْ قَرَاهَا ملال أو فتور أو سآمة سوى هذا الكتاب فإن فيه بدائع لا تمل إلى القيامة. No matter what book you may study or read it again and again, you would at some time get bored and tired of that book. Except the Qur'an al-Kareem, because its depth, its beauty, its astonishment, its gems and jewels will continue forever and ever. Ila al-Qiyamah means forever and ever. And the equation there is, and we learn even in the Burda, the equation is given to the similitude of the ocean. Why the similitude of the ocean? The more we love and delve into the Qur'an al-Kareem, take the example of a fisherman. One is a fisherman who's standing on the side and he's trying to catch fish. He'll catch a few little smallies, but then we go further, go into the boat, and then we go further into not just the dam, but the sea. Then we'll get whales too and get bigger fish also. Then we'll get amazing sightings. Then what about that person who puts in a suit, that diving suit, and he goes into the depth of the ocean? There he won't only find fish. There he'll find corals and pearls. So same as we go in, that's why the hadith of Tirmidhi, Ali radiallahu anhu's report, this book No one can get tired of this book. Min kathrati rad, despite how much we can repeat and learn and study and delve and indulge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's kalam, we would get finished, but the gems and the jewels of the Qur'an Kareem would never come to an end. That's why our Buzurgan Din say, Qur'an Sharif ko khatam karna maqsood nahi. Just to finish the Qur'an Sharif and I made khatam, that's not the objective. That's not possible. What's meant is, apne zindagi ko, our lives should be spent and sacrificed in the khidmat of the Qur'an Kareem. Apne zindagi ko, Qur'an Sharif ki khidmat mein khatam karna maqsood hai. Spend our lives, sacrifice our lives in the khidmat of the Qur'an Kareem. Because there's nothing that can connect us closer to Allah than the Qur'an Kareem. Because Qur'an comes from the word also. Qara'a yaqra'u means to recite Qur'an. And also it comes from the root letter qarana. Man lam yujawwidil Qur'ana athimu. Qur'an. And from the word qarana. And qarana means to connect. The Qur'an Kareem connects us to Allah, because this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's kalam. This is Allah's kalam. There's an amazing report in Sifatul Safwa of Ibn al-Jawzi rahimahullah, and Al-Mizzi mentions this in his Tahdhibul Kamal, of a great scholar of hadith. He comes in the Sihah. His name was Hamza bin Habib bin Az-Zayyat. His student one day, Sulaim ibn Isa, comes to visit him. And he finds his teacher. Now he's a scholar of hadith, but he's known for the sciences of the Qur'an Kareem, the qira'at of the Qur'an Kareem. He was a great teacher of the Qur'an Kareem. So his student comes to see his teacher to learn, and he enters upon Imam Hamza rahimahullah, وَهُوَ يُمَرِّغُ خَدَّيْهِ فِي التُّرَابِ. And this great scholar was dipping his face into the dust, rubbing it into the sand, and he was crying profusely, crying severely, crying immensely. So the student got worried. Hazrat, what's wrong? What happened? Ya Allah. What happened, Hazrat? He asked him. So he says that I saw a vision last night. And this report, as it's mentioned, that كَأَنَّ الْقِيَامَةَ قَدْ قَامَتْ. I saw the day of judgment taking place. And the announcement was made that أَيْنَ قُرَّاءُ الْقُرْآنِ الَّذِينَ عَمِلُوا بِهِ فِي الدُّنْيَا. Who were called forward? The scholars of the Qur'an Kareem. Those who are connected to the Qur'an Kareem, who practiced and made amal on the Qur'an Kareem. So this great Imam of Qur'an and Hadith, he says, فَرَجَعْتُ الْقَهْقَرَى. I retreated, I went back without even turning, because in shock. This was his humility. Why? He says, I went back. He says, where can I be amongst those who studied the Qur'an and read the Qur'an with amal? His life was devoted to the Qur'an Kareem, and this is how he considered himself. And this is the quality of humility, is the quality, the sign of acceptance, where a person does and doesn't feel he's doing. But when a person thinks he's doing and he wants praise for it, that's a sign of rejection. A person should want Allah's pleasure in every action. If our intention is name and fame, we'll end up with nothing but a flame, and we'll suffer in the hereafter. The objective must be the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to make Allah happy. Rada'i ilahi wa ridwanum min Allahi akbar. So here he says, as I'm retreating, the announcement then said, Aina Hamza ibn Habib bin Zayyat. Where is this scholar? Hamza, rahimahullah. So I said, Labbaik, da'i Allah, labbaik. Oh, the caller who's announcing on behalf of my Allah, I'm here. I'm at your beck and call. So, فَبَدَرَنِي malakun. An angel quickly comes forth, and standing before me, he says, say, Labbaik Rabbi Azza wa Jal. Respond to Allah's call. And now I was shocked, and I responded to the call. And now I'm called forward. And as I'm ushered forward, this Imam says, I was told to read, recite and ascend, Iqra wartaqi. Like the hadith says, read and ascend higher and higher. كَمَا كُنْتَ تُرَتِّلُ فِي الدُّنْيَا, as you used to recite the Qur'an Kareem with love and passion and devotion and dedication as you did in the world night and day. Carry on, recite like that. And as I was reciting, I'm rising higher and alighting and rising, and I see these pulpits of pearl, emerald, ruby as described clearly in this report. He says, then I was told to start Surah An'am. So as I recite Surah An'am, and the verse comes, وَهُوَ الْقَاهِرُ فَوْقَ عِبَادِهِ وَهُوَ الْقَاهِرُ فَوْقَ عِبَادِهِ. So I'm told, I'm addressed, am I not al-qahiru fawqa ibadi? So Hazrat Hamza rahimahullah says, now I was sure I was speaking directly to my Lord. I said, of course, O my Lord. And I carried on reading until I then started Surah A'raf, which is the next surah after An'am. These two Makki surahs. The first of the, besides the Al-Fatiha, the longest Makki surah is A'raf of the Qur'an Kareem. And I'm reading Surah A'raf. Allahu Akbar, respected students and beloveds, study in Surah A'raf. Allah mentions the Anbiya alayhimus salam so clearly in such a sequence. And this sequence we find repeated in most of the chapters where Allah mentions these Anbiya alayhimus salam. In the similar sequence, Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, Hazrat Hud alayhi salam, Hazrat Salih alayhi salam. Now interesting is study the genealogy of Hazrat Salih alayhi salam's people. They actually were the offspring of the believing people of Hud alayhi salam. Ad's people who were spared from the wind, that powerful wind that Allah sent. The believers were spared due to their iman. Those who were spared became the nation of Salih alayhi salam, known as Thamud. Imagine, Thamud are the remnant of the believers. Their forefathers were believers. You and I could say that no, our children will remain on Islam. If we don't make the effort of Qur'an and Sunnah and Deen upon our children, they could become murtad. And as we see it in the same nation, there's no such thing, oh, everybody's iman is spared. There's no such thing. Effort has to be made. Neglect a garden, it becomes a jungle and a bush, an infestation of scorpions and snakes and monkeys. That's a garden, becomes a bush, neglected for a few months. What would happen to our deen and iman when we neglect it? When the forces of batil are attacking our children, us and our children more from the grassroots level, from every avenue. So analyze the genealogy of these two nations. But look at back to the sequence. Now imagine, Salih alayhi salam is telling his people, remember your forefathers, how were they destroyed with the winds that Allah sent. Nothing can escape Allah's punishments. Come right. They said, our people didn't know. Winds came, we got contacts. We constructed our castles in the mountains. If the winds come, we resort to our castles. No resort to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what we have to teach our children. Take your resort in Allah. La malja wa la manja min Allah illa ilay. This is why the effort of dawat and iman upon our children from young. The child must be able to give dawat. The child must talk about Allah. The child must speak about Allah. That Allah is doing, makhluk can't do. Everything is from Allah and nothing is from makhluk. Every child, young and old, boy and girl in our home must be able to give this dawah that Allah is doing. Allah se hota hai, makhluk se kuch nahi hota. Allah's, until this conviction must permeate and penetrate into the recesses of our hearts and our children's hearts. Otherwise, they're up for something. Our children have to be able to stand up for deen and iman from young. Teach them, child, you give dawat. And teach him from young to give dawah to anybody. Tomorrow he'll be able to, like Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, imitating Hazrat Musa alayhi salam and our Janabi Rasulullah, he'll talk to the fara'ina of the time, but teach him from young. Don't be a chicken. Stand up for Allah. Talk about Allah. Invite to Allah. Remove that fear. Teach him from young. He must stand up for Allah. And he must have the passion to die for Allah from young, like the Sahaba kiram radiyallahu anhum. To say it is easy. कहने के काम सिर्फ नहीं है, करने का चीज़ है. It's not just to say Allah forgive us, it's easy for us to say it. So Salih alayhi salam, this is the sequence. Nuh alayhi salam, Hud alayhi salam, Salih alayhi salam, then Lut alayhi salam, generally in most of the chapters. Then Shu'aib alayhi salam. But in this chapter, Shu'aib alayhi salam, then Musa alayhi salam. In Surah Shu'ara, same sequence, but Musa alayhi salam was brought with Ibrahim alayhi salam right at the beginning. Then in this chapter, Allah tells us about Musa alayhi salam in the greatest detail. Because 3 chapters of the Qur'an Kareem discusses Musa alayhi salam, despite the 139 times he's mentioned in the Qur'an Kareem. But 3 chapters discuss him in the greatest of detail. Surah An'am, Surah Qasas, and Surah Taha that we heard in the Isha prayer. These 3 chapters discuss Musa alayhi salam in the greatest of detail, and each of these chapters highlight a different aspect of Hazrat Musa alayhi salam's life. After Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, the Qur'an Kareem draws an amazing distinction between every Nabi of Allah and the greatest of Allah's creation. قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ إِنِّي رَسُولُ اللَّهِ إِلَيْكُمْ جَمِيعًا. Every Nabi, وَكَانَ النَّبِيُّ يُبْعَثُ إِلَى قَوْمِهِ خَاصَّةً وَبُعِثْتُ إِلَى النَّاسِ عَامَّةً. And the same distinction is drawn in Surah Maryam, Taha, and Al-Anbiya. When all the Anbiya alayhimus salam are mentioned, 10 Anbiya alayhimus salam or so in Surah Maryam, 2 Anbiya alayhimus salam are detailed in Surah Taha, the remaining Anbiya alayhimus salam are mentioned in Surah Anbiya, then the Qur'an Kareem draws a clear distinction. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. That, oh my Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, every Nabi was great, but he was for his people. And his Nabi was, his nubuwwah was for his time. But your nubuwwat is timeless, borderless. It transcends all bounds, all nations, all nationalities, all countries, all races, all languages, all regions, all humanity in totality. This is the distinction Qur'an Kareem draws. You and I, as students who are becoming scholars, as warathatul anbiya, understand this. We have to work on the whole of mankind, and it is our duty and responsibility as warathatul anbiya. So Hazrat Hamza rahimahullah says, I'm reading Al-A'raf, and as I arrive at the sajda in A'raf, because that's the first sajda in the Qur'an, I'm about to go into sajda, and I'm told there's no more taklif in akhirah. Now no more. Subhanallah. So what we learn, the Qur'an Kareem is not a taklif, it's a pleasure. That's another lesson we learn in this incident, the Sahih incident. He's not allowed to make sajda, because you made sajda in the dunya. Now no sajda. But interestingly, Quran Sharif has so much of pleasure. It's a pleasure. Allah Ta'ala give us the halawa of the Quran Kareem. He says, then I'm asked, who taught you? So I'm mentioning my asatida, Al-A'mash, Sulaiman. And then I'm told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Sadaqa Sulaiman. وَمَنْ أَقْرَأَ Sulaiman. So I'm told, until it comes to so Hamza bin Habib bin Ziyad, Sulaiman Al-A'mash, and then he comes to Abu Abdir Rahman As-Sulami. And each time, each rawi from whom that ustad took from, and the answer is given to me by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Sadaqa Abu Abdir Rahman. وَمَنْ أَقْرَأَ Abu Abdir Rahman. Who taught Abu Abdir Rahman? So I said, Ibn Ammi Nabiyyik sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Because Abu Abdir Rahman As-Sulami is one of the great rawis of hadith. He comes in the Sihah repeatedly. Abu Abdir Rahman As-Sulami, the famous hadith, خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ وَعَلَّمَ. Who's the narrator of that hadith? You tell me. Hazrat Uthman bin Affan, other Sahaba as well. But who's the narrator from him? Abu Abdir Rahman As-Sulami. Abu Abdir Rahman As-Sulami was the student of Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu. But when Hazrat Uthman became the Khalifa, Hazrat Uthman sent him to Ali radiallahu anhu. And that's where he studied. That's why he says, Ibn Ammi Nabiyyika sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So Sadaqa Aliyun, Allah tells me. Then who taught Ali radiallahu anhu? Says, your beloved Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam taught him. So Allah Ta'ala tells me, Sadaqa Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And who taught my Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Jibreel alayhi salam. And who taught Jibreel alayhi salam? Hazrat Hamza rahimahullah says, I didn't have the guts to say Anta. Because how can I just say to Allah, Anta, subhanahu wa ta'ala? So Allah Ta'ala tells me, say Anta. And then I said as I was told. And then he says, Allah Ta'ala placed on me ghaliya. Ghaliya is the most expensive perfume. And He gave me, subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah forgive us, we don't know how to quote these incidents. Allah forgive us for our mistakes. Allah give us the understanding. He gave me the greatest of izzat and ikram. And then He told me, لَيْسَ هَذَا لَكَ وَحْدَكَ. Tell all those who are connected to the Qur'an Kareem, man fawqak wa man dunak, everyone connected to the Qur'an Kareem, tell them that I love nothing like the way I love the Qur'an Kareem, and all those who are connected in every way to the Qur'an Kareem. وَهَذَا ذِكْرٌ مُبَارَكٌ أَنزَلْنَا. This Qur'an is Mubarak. Mubarakun. Our Hazrat Mufti Haq Sahab Dama Barakatum says so beautifully, Mubarakun qari'uhu, Mubarakun mujawwiduhu, Mubarakun sami'uhu, Mubarakun khadimuhu, Mubarakun nashiruhu. Every aspect, Mubarakun khadimuhu, everyone who's connected to the Qur'an Kareem in any and every way, his life becomes blessed. So Allah Ta'ala says to Hamza rahimahullah, say this to all those connected to the Qur'an Kareem. Beloved brothers, then he says to his student that how can I not cry when Allah saw me? So Allah Ta'ala showed me such an amazing vision and lesson. Beloved brothers, this is how fortunate are you and I as students of Deen. Never stop learning. The Qur'an Kareem never comes to an end. It's timeless. Timeless. Gee. لها معان كموج البحر في مددي وفوق جوهره في الحسن والقيام. Allah Ta'ala give us tawfiq inshallah.